The red light is on. We are transmitting. I am so glad you're here. I want to welcome you to the very first episode of Web Components in Space. Yes, we are up in space in my very own custom-built space lab. I think it's pretty amazing. Anyway, I want to welcome you all. My name is Ben Farrell. Like I said, this is the very first episode of my brand new video series on web components. Now, we're going to explore web components from the perspective of building an application, building individual web components, just playing around and having fun. And I think we'll have some fun. Now, I want to know who you are. Are you someone that is watching this transmission and maybe you've built some things with web components, you're not sure where to go next, you want some ideas? I hope we'll have you covered. I hope we're going to have some fun learning. But also, maybe you're someone that has heard of web components and you just want to know how to get started. Well, I think this very first episode is very much for you. But regardless of who you are, I think you're going to have questions. And that very first question is, why all this complexity? Why did you go to the trouble of building your very own space lab and orbit the Earth? I've been using web components for several years now, and they've recently gotten really good. I really do enjoy working with them. I've built some great things with them, but over the past 2 years, there's been some mysterious things happening in the web components world, and it's troubling me. I guess I should explain further. This means we have to go back to the origin of web components, which is around 2011. Now, I know a lot of you that are watching, maybe you weren't even doing web development back in 2011. After all, it was a decade ago. So if you had been doing web development back then, and you had been going to some conferences, you might have passed by some Google engineers, seen a presentation on web components. This was basically just UI components baked into your browser as a set of standards. And it was really a set of 3 standards that made up this idea of web components. And this means that I can create a UI component and have it work in any context I want, whatever framework I want. So this is like one of the main things about web components. They're interoperable with any context. You can make a component and put it anywhere. It's a DOM element after all. So 2011 was a time of JavaScript framework fatigue. We were being more ambitious about what we could put on the web. And that's a very good thing. Like the web is capable of so much. And so all of a sudden you had front-end tooling, you had tons of frameworks coming in. Like all of a sudden people were saying, hey, get rid of jQuery, let's use Angular, let's use Ember or Dojo or Backbone. And your head was spinning and I just learned this thing and you want me to learn this new thing? And it was happening like every month, every couple of months. So personally, I very much welcome this new web standards built into your browser for making UI component that can go in any context whatsoever, any framework. Unfortunately, there was some problems building with them. Now, usually when you have a new proposal for a web standard, what you do is you polyfill it, right? You drop the polyfill JavaScript in your project, and all of a sudden you can use this feature. This is absolutely fantastic for JavaScript features, works great, but part of the problem with web components was that, well, some things are harder to polyfill, and web components contained a few standards. One of them is more ambitious than the others because it tries to involve CSS, and trying to polyfill CSS from JavaScript is super hard. Couple this with the fact that web components were evolving for years, and as feedback was coming in from the community, this is a great place to be because you want to shape the future of this new standard that goes into the web. But the problem when you're offering all this feedback and your feedback is taken seriously, the rug is constantly being pulled out from underneath your feet as you're working on things. All that changed in fall of 2019. Now, fall of 2019 was an amazing time for web components because we had the standards built into Chrome for a while. But 2019 was the time when Firefox and Safari finally adopted them. That's awesome. We finally had HTML templating. We finally had custom elements. And my favorite, the shadow DOM. I love the shadow DOM. And this was the CSS feature that was hard to polyfill. The other thing that was happening at this time was that there was a huge ecosystem being built up. One of those ecosystem pieces was a lot of tools built by this organization called Open Web Components. The other thing that was happening in this space was Lit from Google. It wasn't invented just then, but it was becoming more mature and just more awesome. And on a personal level, this time was super exciting because, wait for it, my book, Web Components in Action, from Manning Publications, was just put out at that exact same time. So my book covers just the standards because while I was writing it, nothing was stable yet, right? And libraries come and go. So I didn't know if Lit was going to stand. I didn't know if some of the ecosystem stuff from OpenWC was going to stand. So I just wanted to focus on the standards. So I think it still stands the test of time, my book. But there's a whole lot of things that have happened since then. And I think doing a video series is a good way to cover it. Now, even though fall of 2019 was an awesome time for web components, there were some detractors, right? Any new technology, you're gonna have folks that don't like it for some reason or another. But luckily, over the next couple of years, web components have really taken off. And when I say take off, I mean that literally. So in June of 2020, SpaceX had launched a rocket, the Dragon X rocket, and at its helm, web components, JavaScript, Chromium. That's amazing. And so it went up to space, it came back down and landed. And if you're looking at that back on Earth, you're saying, wow, that is inspiring. And this is the point where I'm starting to get skeptical, a little scared, because the headlines that came next were troubling. Fast, a new UI component library from Microsoft. Well, that's cool. I mean, component libraries are what web components should be best at. I'm glad that Microsoft is getting into the game. And Adobe. Oh my goodness. Adobe built Photoshop on the web with web components. That shouldn't be possible, right? And then, of course, GitHub. GitHub shows that, hey, we're using web components too. So all of a sudden, if you're using source control through GitHub, you're using web components too. So they're spreading everywhere. Yeah, so to me, this all happened way too fast and suspiciously close to the SpaceX rocket going up to space and then coming back down. So my question that's just really got me disturbed lately is, what actually happened in space? Now, I don't want to tell you that web components are dangerous, because I really enjoy using them, but something definitely amplified, the typical buttons, the accordions, the hamburger menus, and it made them incredibly potent after coming down from space. Now, as a prototyper, I really like to play with more volatile, experimental, or just inventive technologies that you just don't see every day. I'm wondering, can the unknowns of space, if I go to space, can I make some super powerful web components with these experimental technologies? I think the answer might be yes. So that's part of the reason why I'm in space. But the other reason I'm in space is that these are volatile technologies. Is something going to go wrong with them? What if I created a monster and it spreads across the planet? So this is exactly why I'm up in space. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by finding a new technology on the web, and we'll wrap it up as a web component, and then we'll sit down to interview the original author. Then we'll use real production-ready tools in the web components ecosystem to build a small app of our own with this brand new experimental web component. Now, keep in mind, I'm a prototyper at heart. I love playing with new things, being strict about my code, and always adhering to best practices. It doesn't help iterate quickly, and it doesn't make it enjoyable. So I promise you, not a single unit test will be written like we all pretend to do in our day jobs. We'll have fun experimenting, playing around. So again, welcome to Web Components in Space. Let's get started. Let's get building things. Let's create.